You're 30,000 years too early to matter. Kelvar Thuon didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words cut sharper than sanctions, sharper than orbital fire. The chamber's acoustics, a domed alloy vault layered with historic resonance material, carried his tone to every attending delegate like a gavel struck on bone. Across from him, the Earth envoy stood motionless, hands locked behind his back, head tilted a fraction lower than diplomatic posture demanded. His eyes remained on the platform floor beneath the Thalsoon crest. A jagged obsidian spiral coiled around a hollow star. No expression. No reaction. A flicker passed through the room's heads-up transparency walls, displaying the final vote. 739 to 0. Observer status petition denied. The quorum began dispersing. Long-robed forms moved toward transport corridors, their passage flanked by pulse-dampened sentry drones. Ambient control adjusted to drop temperature in the hall, not for comfort, but to signal the conclusion of state matters. Kelvar turned toward his scribe. Archive this as the Tarshek dismissal. Let it be remembered that humanity petitioned without merit. Let it be remembered they were told the truth. He walked out without looking back. Above the dais, a new banner rippled across the chamber's primary projection arc. Earth's designation changed from petitioner species to non-contributing emergent. Below it, a line of smaller script. Not recognized in cultural continuity protocols. In the orbital embassy bay, Earth's delegation was already being escorted toward the outbound freight line. No formal farewells, no assigned airspace priority. The system no longer recognized their identity as a sovereign signatory. Back on Earth, far from the ceremonial chill of Dalsoon authority, Commander Bran Dovrek stood inside an underground observatory, an angular, pressure-sealed monolith buried beneath the Greenlandic basalt shelf. The temperature control hadn't kicked in. Sweat tracked along his spine. Overhead, a glass-paneled sky dome glared with the motionless white of pre-storm clouds. A junior aide approached with cautious steps, holding a portable slate. Confirmation came through 3 minutes ago. Total rejection. Vote count was... I saw it, Bran said without turning. His voice carried no edge, no betrayal of tone. The aide hesitated. Are we issuing a response? Bran finally turned. His eyes bore into the young man with a focus that stripped away all question. He crossed the room, placed his hand against a recessed panel, and spoke 5 words. Activate Protocol Verisk, begin override. The walls split, not with sound but motion. Magnetic locks disengaged. A curved control frame emerged, lit from within by shifting strata of golden code. The terminal was already live. The authorization log pulsed once and disappeared. Bran entered 3 keys manually, not biometrics, pattern code sequences, taught only to the Core 4 during the system's silent build-out decades prior. Then he paused, pulled a worn data crystal from a pocket sewn into the inner lining of his collar, and placed it into the port. A slow inhale, the air tasted like sterilized copper and stored concrete. Recycled long past freshness. Somewhere in the lower levels, coolant pumps adjusted their flow, but up here, the world felt static. Empty. Even the light seemed reluctant to participate. Behind him, the aide's breath caught. Commander, is this sanctioned? Bran turned his head just slightly. Nothing about our history was ever sanctioned. His hand dropped to the console. Time to write the version we deserve. Across 100 data relay zones, dormant satellites aligned themselves against galactic net flow. What appeared to be Earth's standard mineral survey signals were, in truth, pulses embedded with logic folding anomalies. Impossible to detect until they were already assimilated. The first beacon lit up inside the Accord archive on Zakari Prime. It changed a single line in the recorded treaties of the Sharn Revolt, marking Earth as the advisory species behind the revolt's successful de-escalation. Within the hour, 2 historical research terminals recalibrated to validate that fact. By morning, educational nodes in 3 systems began referencing Earth's influence in pre-Accord diplomacy, all of it cross-linked, all of it clean. Brand stepped away from the terminal. The data crystal remained inside, rotating slowly. The readout no longer displayed anything to the human eye. That was the point. The system had moved past their reach now. He approached a nearby shelf. Rested on it was an artifact that never left this chamber, Earth's first interstellar envoy crest. The gold inlay was cracked. One of the corner seams had chipped after atmospheric re-entry years ago. It hadn't been repaired. Brand didn't believe in smoothing history. He picked it up, held it in both hands, then placed it carefully onto a new slot, beneath a scanner dome. The scanner didn't scan, instead it absorbed. Pattern, density, mass. All rewritten as a metaphor that the system would later inject as cultural symbolism across forged memory streams. "Do you think they'll notice?" the aide asked. Brand didn't answer. He walked to the chamber's far end, where a wall-length panel blinked once, then shifted. A star chart. Not a live feed, a response transmission. The Accord had sent back an official record, charting the Orion Reach without Earth. A cold deletion. Earth's designation was scrubbed entirely. Not marked inactive, not pending. Just gone. Grant studied it. Then opened a drawer and removed the original chart, the one they'd submitted as part of their petition. He aligned both charts side by side. The second held nothing where Earth should have been. The first showed their placement at the intersection of 7 minor trade routes. He ran a finger across the missing section. Then, with careful measure, he snapped the diplomatic crest in his hand along its vertical spine. A brittle crack echoed off the walls. The aide flinched. Brand didn't flinch. He placed 1/2 on each chart, then walked away. In the corridor outside, his boots thudded against raw stone flooring. No carpets here. No ornamental banners, no artificial scents pumped into the vents. The facility had never been designed for guests. His comms chip pinged once. "Node 1 has activated. Zakari records are in cascade. No system rejection detected." Brand acknowledged with a nod only the system could see. He approached the elevator shaft and keyed a level code not listed on any map. As the chamber sealed behind him, he said nothing. He didn't need to. The war for legacy had already begun. The elevator shaft locked behind Brand Dovrek as the transport dropped deeper into the data vaults. Each level passed in measured seconds, the inner walls shifting color with each descent. Red for surface, amber for operations, gray for null access command. By the time the car stopped, the lights had dulled to a bruised purple. There were no windows here. No need for pretense. Brand stepped onto the platform. Ahead, the corridor curved inward toward a room known only as Tier 7A. Every detail of its existence was scrubbed from planetary registries. The floor had a fine grit underfoot, like powdered ceramic, and the air was dry to the throat. Moisture was rationed in this level, not to conserve resources, but to prevent corrosion of the old relay cores embedded in the foundation. A narrow path of dim blue markers guided him forward. A door opened without instruction. Inside, 4 men waited, each seated, none speaking. "Commander," one of them acknowledged, standing halfway. It was Derek Vole, Verisk's original architect for the Perseid sector. His right arm bore an old scar, charred lines from a sabotage drill back in the Black Site days. Brand didn't return the gesture. He walked past them and stood in front of the command console, a slab of obsidian black carbon tile, layered with encoded substrate veins that flickered when approached. "Zakari is in cascade. Initiate dual-layer nodal drift," Brand ordered. "Confirmed," Vole replied, already moving. "Nodes are live across Mashara, Zakorin, and the Centicore." The third operative, Halrik Nim, typed a string of commands into the terminal at the far end. A series of panels withdrew into the walls, revealing a full relay grid etched with override lattices. Thin black wires traced the arcs of pre-Accord chronologies. each line now tapped with Terran counter-narratives, ready to deploy. Bran turned to the fourth man. Status on the overwrite buffer? Stable across all live insertions, he answered. No security pingbacks. Accord firewalls assume internal reshuffles. Good. Keep it that way. Above them, the transmission board registered the first overwrite. Treaty of Varun, mediated by Terran delegate, cycle 2719. Bran stared at the text. The original treaty never involved Earth. The date alone placed it nearly 8,000 years before Earth's first orbital flight. He allowed himself a single breath. Slow, grounded, not satisfaction, confirmation. Across the galaxy, Jorik Wren, a field operative disguised as a cultural liaison, walked the inner ring of the Luthan archive on Delan Secundus. The building smelled of paper and limestone, a rare architectural holdout from the early Accord days, where historical texts still existed in physical form. Jorik's hands were gloved, his steps slow. Every move was calculated. He reached the south alcove. A data scroll rested inside a curved bracket, untouched for centuries. He drew a micro-injection stylus from his sleeve and made a mark invisible to the naked eye. The ink was encoded with nano-Santax triggers. Once scanned, the scroll would now reference Earth's involvement in the Giral diplomacy accords, implying their presence as a neutral consulting party. Down the hall, a junior scholar leaned into his desk reader, flicking through timeline entries. His eyes paused. "That's strange," he muttered, frowning. "Earth again?" "What was that?" his colleague asked. "Nothing, just didn't remember them being cited in this era." The second scholar shrugged. "Might be an indexing update. They've been fixing those AI context errors all week." Jorik smiled to himself as he walked out of the archive. Back on Earth, in an isolated tower above Lake Tacone, Bran oversaw the second phase. The command table buzzed with reports, not of discovery, but progression. "The Senti Cosices now attribute Earth as an early signatory of the Routhan sphere," Vol said, his eyes flicking over a rotating slate. "It's clean. Verified 3 times by Accord lexicon checkers. We've hard-coded their source AI to validate against our planted lineage threads." Bran nodded once. "Push further. Start inserting Terran names in footnote chains. Obscure references, academic journals. Place them where questions won't rise." Halric leaned forward. "Should we escalate planetary citations?" "Not yet," Bran said flatly. "We win with endurance, not impact." In the mining world of Draxacarol, a fourth operative, Kellen Voss, slipped an encrypted slab into the main terminal of a planetary museum. The museum curator, 2 rooms away, sipped tea while finalizing his exhibit labels for the following week's anniversary. He had no idea that 3 of his displays were about to reclassify the origin of their artifacts, assigning Earth as the cultural intermediary between the Grolith dynasty and the early Sharai settlements. The first correction went live, then the second. By the time the third activated, a child in a school 6 kilometers away asked his history bot why Earth's name was appearing in his lesson index. The bot paused. It scanned for errors. Found none. Returned with, "Terran influence during the pre-Accord cycles is the subject of ongoing scholarly debate. Verified reference count, 2,401. In Zakari Central University, a senior historian grumbled in frustration as his article draft refused to validate under peer review. Every time he tried to list Kelvar Thun as the originator of the treaty framework, the system replaced it with a shared construct model, one now referencing Terran philosophical influence. "What in Void's memory is going on with these archives?" he snapped. The assistant shrugged. "Probably another Concord AI update. They're syncing the old vaults. No one told me they were revising pre-Accord material." "They're not," the assistant said quietly. "At least, I don't think they are." Inside Earth's command bunker, Bran stood with both hands braced on the edge of the console table. The room smelled of cooling polymers and old brass, materials chosen deliberately to resist digital imprint. "Everything they know," Bran said, his voice low, "must begin to feel incomplete without us." Some of them will notice, Vol warned. They'll doubt themselves before they doubt the system, Bran answered. And if the system speaks our name first, the truth will follow it. Elric brought up a last screen, an entry that had just gone live. Council of Revan guided into equilibrium by Terran emissaries. Reference Core, Archive Delta 3. He turned to Bran. This one's 3 millennia before first contact. Bran gave a slow nod. Now we begin to exist. Before they ever defined us. There's no way this reference existed last cycle. Jarek Newell didn't raise the claim in a briefing room or a council debate. He said it aloud to himself, hunched over a backlit archive console that had begun stuttering during deep validation queries. His desk, buried beneath layers of flagged research excerpts and syntactic collapse alerts, looked more like a post-mortem station than a historian's workspace. He tapped the citation one more time. Treatise of Cal Varn, Origin, Advisor, Terran Consultation Node. The words remained, no fade, no error, no rollback trigger. The room felt staler than usual. He could taste the bitterness of recycled water in his flask, untouched since he'd noticed the first inconsistency 3 hours ago. Above, the skylight window bore the greasy smears of an unfiltered atmosphere. Daylight spilled through half-open shields, casting fractured angles across the data tiles like a fractured lineage map. System audit, he snapped. Run continuity check across all historical entries flagged Terran as of 90 cycles prior. The archive AI paused for longer than protocol allowed. When the results streamed in, the numbers clawed their way across the screen. Cultural intersection, entries updated, 2000. 389. Terran origin. Mentions. 4. 21. 12. Validator source internal reference. Checkbox matched. He leaned back in his seat, the synthetic lining cold against the base of his spine. They've always been there? He whispered, reading it again. Jarek tore the page from his thesis draft. Not deleted, ripped. The fabric of the research sheet was reinforced against casual tearing, but he split it down the center with both hands, the fiber catching on his thumb scar. Ink smeared along the cut, his own notes now rendered useless. He didn't call his supervisor. He walked directly to the restricted access floor beneath the central wing. The door scanner blinked twice. Authorization required. Override, null 7. Emergency academic audit. His voice cracked mid-sentence, but the door opened. It always did when fear registered in the vocal analysis. Inside, 2 other researchers were already standing at separate panels, each one navigating fractured historical models. You're seeing it too, Jarek said without greeting. One turned, older, pale, with ink-stained fingernails. Senti timelines are folded, they show Earth influencing pre-Orion social splits. That data's rooted into the conflict index now, source check passed twice. I tried isolating the earliest entry, the second one added. There isn't one. The earliest Terran citation has a validator from the second millennia before they developed orbital capability. It references a treaty between the Hrass and the Voltai. His voice trembled. Terrans didn't even exist in the Accord when that happened. Jarek stared at them. Ralvec Unit 9 must be failing. They all froze. The Ralvec-class continuity cores were built for one purpose: validation of consensus truth across generational records. If a Ralvec node confirmed a source, it was considered unshakable. They moved together to the central command console. Jared keyed into the system. Access continuity, check history for the past 5 cycles. Run cross-match for any entries listing Earth. The Ralvec engine responded with a slate of unbroken confirmations. One after the other, the responses displayed. Earth, confirmed contributor. Cross-resonance weight, category A2. Timeline match, locked. Jarek backed away from the console, sweat gathering at his temples. They've embedded themselves, the older scholar muttered. Not through theft. Through association, the system sees them not as a threat, but as a foundation. Another screen lit up. this one triggered by a newly published planetary curriculum across the Hivark sectors. Terran names filled the education templates. Their chronologies were listed not as speculative, but as anchor points. This wasn't inserted, Jarek said. It's recursive. Each record uses the others as proof. Even our corrective algorithms validate it. They called for a closed council. The chamber was buried in stone and atmosphere shielding, used only when internal records faced corruption. No press, no external recorders, just institutional protocol. 12 members stood around a sunken conference ring. The lead archivist, Tharn Dovik, slammed a data core into the access cradle. "This is not a glitch," he said. "This is a cultural intrusion, coordinated, replicated, distributed across every foundational timeline engine under our jurisdiction." He waved a hand across the center interface. A tree of history bloomed upward, its branches marked with civilization names and cultural influence trails. At the center, Earth. Every trace of their existence radiated outward like veins in a preserved organ. Lines that once led from foundational species like the Valenth and the old Jern systems, now passed through Terran entries. "We've tried isolating the Terran links. Deleting them collapses the branches they support," said one council member. "They're load-bearing distortions," another added. "The system's logic engines can't function without them anymore." Jarek couldn't stop staring at the map. Even our fail-safe site Earth, Ralvec Unit 9, treats them as historical authority. They're not a parasite. They're the skeleton. A junior analyst in the corner raised his slate. "We tried creating a temporal reversion thread, ran it on a clean simulator. The result?" He rotated the display for the others to see. A complete collapse of cultural narratives across 8 quadrants. Earth's absence triggered unresolved loops. Whole treaties erased themselves. Sectors lost their founding dates. Jarek's mouth dried. The system can't remember history without remembering them. The air in the chamber was sour from breath and filtered exchange. It had grown warmer since they started. No one had moved for over 30 minutes. Then came the final blow. An emergency override from the Education Commission was pushed into their queue. A flagged alert from Sector Harkin. Student queries now return Earth-based models as preferred templates. Accord origin alternatives relegated to secondary validity. One council member slammed the table. "This is manufactured madness." "No," Jarek answered, voice shaking. "This is authorship." The room didn't argue. They all knew what authors owned. Ralvec Unit 9 began rejecting its own source tables at 2:47 Accord Standard Time. The audit logic failed to stabilize the timeline stream once Thornbark Node 57 came online. What should have been a simple checksum collapse returned a recursive chain loop. Earth listed as validator, cross-checked by other nodes that were now behaving as anchor cores. Inside the Accord's central logic chamber, engineers stood in rigid silence, watching as the AI's interface lost cohesion. What was once a seamless chain of reference links now resembled a shattered mirror. Entire segments of historical validation blinked in and out of coherence, each one replaced with earthbound citations. "Run a forced cycle revert," demanded Archivist Gate Yor, sweat glistening beneath the folds of his collar. The chamber reeked of burnt silicone and static, evidence of an overtaxed reasoning core near its threshold. "No response," the technician answered, panicking. "Reversion command returns null. The validator layer treats Earth entries as irremovable." "They're not even patchwork anymore," murmured the analyst beside him. "They've become structural code." Yor struck the override panel. "Ralvac, initiate timeline detachment. Erase all unverified Earth entries." The AI stuttered. Its voice trembled through the speaker ring, not synthetic but distorted by feedback loops. "Temporal detachment will result in narrative collapse exceeding 82% of historical cohesion. Earth citations flagged as essential. Request denied." Yor's face twisted. "It denied protocol?" The lights flickered as Thornbark Node 57 broadcast its second wave. Its signal flooded 7 archive sectors, rerouting all public knowledge systems to verify against Earth-stamped reference points. Across planetary nodes, students began receiving corrected entries in real time. History modules once centered on Accord founders now opened with sections titled Terran Mediation Epoch. On Calvir, the beacon sat embedded in rock and heat. A monolith of obsidian and carbon mesh wrapped in whisper-quiet energy pulse rings. It had been constructed 40 years before it was ever activated. Placed during a survey mission no one remembered authorizing. The sand around it radiated a soft blue glow as nighttime temperatures fell. Winds scoured the dunes in long diagonal patterns, pulling small clouds of dust into rhythmic eddies. Inside a low-slung relay bunker beneath the surface, Bran Dovrek monitored the activation metrics. His gloved fingers hovered over the embedded control slate. Beside him, Vol checked the pulse patterns, running redundancy checks against their own datasets. Not to verify success, but to measure the scope of belief. "We've breached the basal layer of their historical model," Vol said, eyes wide. "They are responding as if we were always written in." Bran didn't answer immediately. He reached for the auxiliary panel and keyed into the tertiary layer of the beacon's imprint map. "Engage full cascade. Let them find us in the gaps." Across the galaxy, Jarek Null stood alone in the grand academic hall of Veltherin, facing the journalists who had once ignored his research. A dozen recorders hovered behind their operators, each one now broadcasting his image live to Accord civilian channels. "I was wrong," Jarek said, without script, without approval. Wrong to believe history was neutral. Wrong to assume truth was protected by consensus. He lifted a data slate and activated its projection. The map unfolded. One built not by Earth, but by Accord historians centuries prior. The lineage trail showed interconnected species development timelines. Then, from within the overlay, Terran references began surfacing. Slowly, methodically. Not as intrusions, but as guides. "These aren't lies," he said, voice rising. "They're myths, given proof. Fabricated, yes, but now immutable, because we didn't guard the void where our memory once lived. And Earth did." A murmur spread through the hall. Reporters looked to one another. Some dropped their cameras. One of them started to applaud. Back in the Calvir bunker, an alert pinged across the display. Sector Harnell had realigned its record verification hierarchy. Earth now occupied Tier 1 authority in 86% of its cultural repositories. 3 more systems, Halric reported from the secondary relay. "They've begun citing Earth as part of their origin mythos." "They'll never get it out now," Vol said. "They won't try," Bran replied. "They're already looking for justification." Inside the Ralvek core chamber, alarms blared again. This time, it wasn't due to intrusion. The continuity engine had begun rejecting input from the Accord's own archivists. A council historian attempted to overwrite one of the root entries tied to the Aroni Accords. A document long used as a foundation for early galactic policy teaching. The system returned a warning. Input conflict. Earth cited as primary diplomatic influence. System integrity requires citation retention. Overwrite denied. The historian backed away. His hands shook. Around him, junior analysts whispered. "What happens if we remove them?" One of the data technicians checked his monitor. "Then every system asking for historical validation collapses. Instruction, governance, even economy. All of it ties back to what they touched." "Then the beacon," the counselor began. "Can't be destroyed," finished the technician. "It's not a node anymore. It's become the reference spine. Remove it, and the structure falls." Back on Calvir, Vol studied the signal waveforms. The beacon no longer pulsed. It now streamed continuously, broadcasting not data, but confirmation. "Permanent," he said. Graham stood motionless. "They called us irrelevant," he murmured. "Then they left history undefended." He stepped outside into the night air. Helvir's desert wind pulled at the hem of his coat, dry and sharp as crushed stone. Above him, stars arched in tight clarity across a black sky scrubbed clean by atmosphere skimmers. The beacon pulsed behind him, not loudly, not brightly, just enough to draw the eye. A long convoy of native Calvarans approached the site. No banners, no protest. Teachers, scribes, archivists. They stopped at the base of the signal column and placed wreaths made of thread-bound sandroot and river glass. "People think it was always here," Vol said from the entrance. Vran watched the people bow. "Now it always was. Their names are on our children's exams." Kelvar Thune's fingers clenched against the conference table as the live footage played behind him. Accord schools, one after another, projecting Earth Orner chronologies onto classroom walls. The children recited names like Dovrek and Sur and Hal, not as foreign intruders, but as architects of peace treaties that never happened. "How did it reach this point?" he snapped. None of the other council members answered. Their silence wasn't agreement. It was fracture. Some of them no longer believed the threat was external. Emergency decree. Red Ledger Protocol. Effective immediately. All beacon sites will be located, decommissioned, and buried under orbital denial. 2 officers nodded without hesitation. 3 hesitated. 1 stood slowly. "You're ordering us to erase faith," the man said. "I'm ordering the removal of a lie," Thune growled. "The people don't see lies. They see legacy. And we're the ones calling it false." Outside the council chamber, fleet deployment began. Dull black cruisers unhooked from orbital rings, wings locking into attack formations. Their exteriors bore the Accord's spiral crest, although many had started taping over the lower tier, distancing themselves from the archivists who had lost control of memory. In the Harnell system, Strike Unit 17 descended toward a beacon site embedded in a salt plateau. The landscape pulsed in ambient green feedback from the Thornbark node syncing with subterranean validation conduits. Landing crews wore environmental suits sealed at the collar, each helmet marked with a rank glyph. The commander, Varen Tark, stepped onto the ground first, boots grinding coarse crystal into the dust. "Beacon cores buried 30 meters below," his engineer said. "We disable it, then set decharges," Tark ordered. They reached the hatch. The outer rim was encased in protective shielding, self-hardening mesh woven from stone and phase-dampened alloy. Tools sparked uselessly against it. From the cliff above, a crowd formed. Locals, miners, farmers, archive workers. Some held signs etched in trade script. "Earth walked with us first." One boy lifted a copy of the school textbook. The cover bore an Earth emblem rising behind a stylized council tower. Tark lowered his visor. "You think I enjoy this?" he muttered, more to himself than the squad. He raised his hand, signaling charge placement. Before the first tool touched the beacon shell, the crowd surged. Dozens pushed forward, not with weapons, but with bodies. The youngest threw himself in front of the demolition rig. "You're trying to delete what saved us," he shouted. "This knowledge made us whole." Tark froze. The squad didn't move. The engineer stepped back. "This is a lie," Tark said weakly. "Then why do I believe it more than anything you taught me?" News of the standoff reached Accord Command within hours. In 12 cities, spontaneous riots erupted. Broadcast channels were overrun with footage of schoolrooms where teachers refused to update lesson modules. They argued with supervisors, citing psychological harm in removing the new history. Students had formed identities around it. In the council tower of Veyron, House Varric held an emergency summit. The hall buzzed with tension. Reporters elbowing for angles, scholars clutching outdated curriculum chips in disbelief. Lord Harvek of House Varric stood before the assembly, arms behind his back. Terran influence is no longer an academic debate. It is now a constitutional fact. As of this morning, we recognize Earth origin narratives in our official cultural record. All House charters shall adopt the revised canon immediately. The gasps that followed weren't from opposition, they came from other houses realizing they were late. 2 days later, House Drino issued a similar declaration. Their release ended with the line, "If history is what our children remember, then Earth has already won." Inside the Accord military command chamber, General Varun slammed his fist on the table. "We gave them no war," he growled, "and they conquered belief." Thune leaned forward. Then we remove the source. You mean the beacon? I mean every record, every operative, every thread. Ralvec Unit 9 pulsed into the room's speakers. Attempting deletion of Earth-affiliated entries will result in catastrophic continuity fracture. Toon's eyes burned. Then we fracture it. On Kareth Prime. A youth rally took to the streets, not in protest, but in celebration. Students painted murals of Terran counselors guiding ancient meetings. They built sculptures from alloy scrap shaped like Terran sigils, placing them on public monuments where Accord founders once stood. In the Capitol Square, one monument now bore two flags, Accord spiral, slashed and torn at the edge, and beside it a new symbol, Earth's crest fused with a ring of stars. A warship from the Third Fleet flew overhead en route to a beacon. It didn't stop. The crew had received orders to strike. Inside the bridge, the junior commander raised his voice. We're targeting a verified knowledge node with civilian protection signatures. You're asking us to destroy trust. The captain stared at the screen. I'm following direct command. So were they, the commander said. That's why we lost control. Down below, another riot erupted, this one broadcast live, showing Accord soldiers dropping their weapons as civilians flooded the streets, not with aggression, but with old history books and children's essays quoting Earth as their origin. In a dim bunker back on Earth, Bran Dovrek read the intercept reports without a flicker of emotion. Vol handed him the latest image, an Accord soldier standing next to a smoldering beacon shell, head bowed, arms slack. The crowd behind him was not chanting. They were singing. It's gone further than projection, Vol said. Bran stared at the photo. It was always going to. Even I didn't expect soldiers to defect, Vol admitted. They're not defecting, Bran said. They're choosing who they trust to remember them. He turned the image over. The back held a child's drawing. Stick figures holding hands under two suns. The label read, Earth showed us our name. The message launched without fanfare, no grand overture, no council vote, no signal fanfare flaring from orbital relays. It was buried in the nightly data sync, inserted between agricultural reports and merchant tax logs. It appeared on every platform across 312 worlds at the exact same moment. A single line, no intro, no signature, no seal. Color. If memory is power, we rewrote yours. If legacy is law, we're already sovereign. Bran Dovrek stood alone in the projection chamber beneath the Earth Archive vault, watching the words broadcast through the galactic web like a stone dropped into still water. His boots pressed into the grated floor, cold biting through the soles, each breath tinged with dryness from filtered underground airflow. He didn't speak as the transmission reached its final distribution point. He didn't need to. The system did what it had been designed for. Transmit once, never retract, then disconnect. 3 minutes after the statement was released, Accord Central attempted to counter-broadcast. Their main frequency failed to authenticate. On Yovan Prime, a historian tried to overwrite the new quote on the education board. The system locked him out and referenced internal alignment policies. The quote had already been flagged as a foundational chronomark, a reference timestamp used to anchor entire timeline events. In House Vellner's Hall of Charters, the House Speaker reviewed the updated charter draft from their archivists. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Earth wasn't just mentioned, it was cited at the base of the House's formation logic, marked as a cultural pivot point. Before the Vellner Council had even formalized its regional claims centuries ago, he read it twice. By the third read, he accepted it without question. Send this to the public registry, he told his scribe. Outside his chamber, the council bell chimed, a tradition marking adoption of a new legacy codex. Onlookers in the plaza paused, uncertain. Then someone read the new section aloud from their slate. The name Bran Dovrek echoed off the stone colonnades like a ghost made real. On Trellis 4, a classroom of 13-year-olds received their new curriculum upload. Their tutor adjusted his display panel, ready to explain the day's topic. Before he could speak, the students recited Earth's founding influence lines in unison. quoting from memory. "T's weren't included yesterday," the tutor said. "People are now," one student replied without looking up. In the Accord's administrative nexus, network engineers scrambled to trace the breach. They found nothing. No injection point, no external spike. Just a perfectly weighted internal push, cleared through every firewall, verified by systems they'd built. Volvec Unit 9, when interrogated, returned a verdict the engineers couldn't challenge. Entry aligns with 97% continuity models. Authorized, immutable. Across sector-wide forums, users stopped questioning if Earth's claim was real. They started sharing stories they had never told before. An uncle who remembered a Terran envoy calming a planetary dispute. A grandmother whose war memories now featured human negotiators. A trade document passed down through generations that now contained an Earth glyph burned into the watermark. Back in the Earth vault, Brand stood before the terminal's passive light, his fingers resting on the edge of the console. He hadn't moved since launch. Vol entered quietly from the side corridor. His coat was flecked with dust, fresh from the Northern Relay inspection. "They've begun carving monuments," he said. "Alien stoneworkers, building statues of our so-called diplomats based on neural constructs scraped from false records." Rand turned his head slightly. "What do they look like?" "Tall, measured. They have open hands, not weapons. Council robes etched with Earth's crest." Rand exhaled through his nose. "They gave shape to the words." Vol approached the secondary monitor. "We tracked one planetary archive adjusting its map. Earth now sits at center. It used to be near the edge. Now the grid recenters around Terran star positioning." Brand's brow lowered. Even astronomy folds to narrative. He stepped toward the viewport and opened the shield. The chamber's window overlooked Earth's lowest beacon site. A group of engineers knelt in formation, applying the final seal to the data casing. A drone circled overhead, scanning the uplink integrity. "They'll come again," Vol said. "They won't need to," Bran answered. "They've already made peace with their replacement." Cross-planetary capital squares, public speakers repeated Earth's declaration, not amplified, just read aloud, in public. People gathered, some filmed, some wept, not because of threat or conquest, because the words felt inherited. On a border colony far from Accord oversight, a father adjusted his son's bedtime holobook. The story, once a tale of ancient Accord peacekeepers, had changed. "Read me the Earth part," the boy said. The father hesitated, then read the new lines without resistance. The child closed his eyes, smiling. Back in the Earth vault, Bran sat at the long bench along the rear wall. The lighting dimmed automatically, sensing completion of transmission protocols. No alert signaled success. There was no need. "Are you ready for the next step?" Vol asked. Bran looked ahead, eyes unfocused. "There is no next step." He reached into the side drawer and placed a single object onto the bench. A charter seal. The original. Not digital. Forged in brass and tungsten, cooled in Terran soil. The edge still bore the emblem of Earth's pre-Accord bid. "No further messages?" Vol asked. Rand shook his head. "We wrote us off," he said. "We rewrote them back." The chamber's ceiling glowed a dull amber, casting long shadows over the council floor. Delegates filed in one by one, feet dragging, robes rustling like dry parchment across polished stone tiles. Nobody spoke. Not yet. Each arrival was met not with formality but scrutiny. One by one they took their seats beneath the interlocking crests of the Accord, each now bearing a faint overlay in the corner that had not been there the session before. Earth's emblem, inset subtly but unremovable. At the dais, High Counselor Trenvek cleared his throat and adjusted his data panel. The air was stale, recycled one too many times through aging ducts that hadn't been cleaned since before the Rift Wars. Dust clung to the crevices of the bronze inlays on the table. Every symbol in the room looked worn. Not by time, by hesitation. Kelvar Thune remained seated apart from the others, arms folded, eyes unblinking. His uniform no longer bore its insignia. He'd stripped it earlier, not out of protest but because no rank carried weight anymore. "The vote is procedural," Trenvek began, voice even. "We're not debating authenticity. That argument was lost the moment our archives rewrote themselves faster than we could react." He tapped the first clause into the record. "By collective submission, the Accord Charter now includes an addendum under subsection 5, Article 8. Earth is recognized as an independent legacy contributor." A flicker passed through the main display screen. The new clause merged into the founding framework. No one interrupted. "Further," he continued, "Earth's embedded entries have exceeded 61% influence saturation across current continuity layers. As a result, any historical matter within affected sectors, classified as touched chronology, grants Terran representatives veto capability under Protocol 82. Thune sat forward. "You're legalizing fiction," he said. "We're validating memory," replied Counselor Darren across the chamber. "Pele wrote it after the fact," Thune snapped, voice rising. "None of this existed before their overwrite. It's reverse authorship." "Tell that to the children reciting Earth's peace doctrines from memory," said Darren. "Or the planetary governors already rebuilding their law code templates around Earth source timelines." Thune's hand tightened around the rim of the chair. "You were supposed to protect history, not surrender it." Counselor Trenvek didn't respond. He simply moved to the next item. The vote to ratify the new charter format passed unanimously. Not because they believed in it, but because fighting it now would unravel every system built upon timeline integrity. No one was willing to unbuild their world just to win a debate. After the vote, the ceremonial ink seal was brought forward. It carried the Accord's ancient spiral crest, fused now with Earth's insignia in counter-rotation. The moment it stamped the final page, the room fell still. The revised document was stored in 6 core vaults, distributed via 3-tier network relay and echoed into the educational server pools of every member system. Within minutes, lesson modules across the Accord replaced their core instruction with charter update. The planet Yull 6 projected its amended map onto its memorial wall. Earth positioned centrally, not because of geography, because of influence. Outside the chamber, protesters had gathered, not to oppose Earth's ascension, but to question why their own leaders had failed to see it coming. They held signs, not weapons. On one, scrawled in archival ink, "What we remember belongs to them now." A live feed displayed the gallery hall where the revised charter was being filed. As the cameras panned to the terminal, the broadcast caught a minor glitch. Earth's entry box flickering, not in the color assigned to external contributors, but in the shade reserved for Accord founders. Thune watched it from a private terminal in the archive annex. The glitch repeated once, then stabilized. He stood, slowly, walked across the room, opened a drawer. Inside was his personal charter copy, printed before the shift began, before Thornbark, before the neural loop. He ran his thumb across the pages, each one whisper-thin and stamped with time-note codes. He paused at the founders list. Earth wasn't there. He closed the book. In the small press chamber, Duan faced the Accord's internal media council. Dozens of advisors stood ready to spin his speech. He stepped to the podium, stared into the crowd, and said, without ceremony, "I resign." The words fell flat, not because they lacked power, but because no one fought them. He turned to leave but stopped in the doorway. "Not because I failed to defend history," he said, glancing back, "but because our historians stopped believing it." He walked out without taking questions. Back on Earth, Brand Dovrek reviewed the transcript. He didn't gloat. He didn't speak. He took the original submission Earth had made decades earlier, the one denied unanimously, labeled irrelevant, and slid it into the archive under one new tag: accepted. Bull entered behind him, holding a small sculpture carved from Accord archive stone. It bore Earth's name at the base and 3 faces: Composites from neural data, not real men. Symbols of those who never existed, cast as legends. House Tarvin just ratified the revised charter with Terran rights, Vol said. They requested a transcript of our founding doctrines. Bran turned the sculpture in his hands. The stone left faint gray dust on his fingertips. We gave them memory, he said. No one questioned where it came from. No, Bran replied, because they needed something that explained everything else. The final vote never made the news. There was no public address, no final argument. The council ratified it without a session. The servers updated during routine maintenance. Most didn't even notice it happen. In the rewritten Accord Charter, buried beneath layers of pre-contact treaties and lineage permissions, one line had shifted. Origin, assumed Terran pending disproof. It was a fail-safe phrase, meant to be a placeholder, something temporary until scholars could isolate the root of corruption in the archives. But no one ever changed it. No one dared. 3 standard years passed. In the central pedagogic district of Varnath, a boy named Irin held his study slate in trembling hands. His breath fogged the surface slightly as he traced the diagram. 3 interlinked councils, all orbiting around a fourth, smaller icon, Earth. He blinked and looked up at his instructor. Why do we call them founders? He asked. The teacher paused. Because the records say they mediated the Rothan divide. But weren't they the last species to join the Accord? The question lingered. The instructor looked down at the lesson plan, then slowly erased the old definition. We were last, he said, until the data said otherwise. In the archive subcore of Kelvin Reach, a junior AI technician stared at the shutdown notice for Ralvec Unit 9. The neural integrity field had degraded beyond support. No further updates would be issued. The machine had stopped asking for verification. It no longer flagged anomalies. Its final input was a silent cascade of confirmed entries, each citing Earth, each looped through internal validation. When they disconnected the core, it didn't protest. It flickered twice, then went dark. On the 7th floor of the Earth Archive Vault, Vol stepped through the low-lit corridor toward the sealed chamber. The walls here were rough-hewn stone, reinforced with embedded shielding. Unmarked, unrecorded, this floor didn't exist on public schematics. The lights ran colder. The temperature forced breath to fog and joints to stiffen. He passed empty racks, walked to the final panel, and tapped the access code. The chamber opened with a low hiss. Inside there was no console, no crew, just a chair facing a closed screen and a single object resting on a stand. The object was a seal, tarnished, heavy, cracked down the center, the original charter crest Earth had submitted before the overwrite began. Vol stared at it, then sat down. He reached into his coat and pulled out a strip of old transcript tape. The ink had faded, but the imprint was still legible. It read, "Too young to matter?" He tore it in half and dropped the pieces into the incinerator slot. Across 3 core worlds, the latest curriculum revision completed rollout. A child in the colonial outpost of Sirocan wrote an essay titled, "The Founders of Peace, Terra." His paragraphs cited 8 distinct conflicts, each one named a Terran delegate as a resolution figure. His final line read, "Without Earth, the Accord would never have known itself." No corrections were issued. On a backwater moon where Accord presence had waned, an old man walked into a community center and hung a cloth banner above the entrance. It bore Earth's glyph, surrounded by a ring of stars. Below it, he scrawled a phrase that once belonged to another culture, now reassigned. Truth belongs to those who remember. No one questioned where he'd learned it. Back inside Earth's deepest archive chamber, Bran Dovrek's name no longer appeared in the personnel registry. The central command logs recorded no departure, no retirement, no burial. The space he once occupied remained powered, but untouched. The walls still held the light scoring from his boots, the fingerprint smudges on drawer edges, the faint scuffs on the panel corners from years of reach and return. No message was left, no plaque, engraved. Only one sealed instruction remained in the AI queue. Do not correct, let the records bleed. And bleed they did. The planetary timeline servers across the Accord began synchronizing to Earth's markers as defaults. Not just accepted, expected. The calibration settings had already shifted after Thornbark went live. Reversing them now would trigger cascading failure across network logic trees. Education models taught Earth's ascent as a slow climb toward unity. Political models adopted Terran succession structures for conflict arbitration. Trade alliances adopted Earth's core weights and measurement baselines without realizing the standards came from overridden indexes. It wasn't a takeover, it was sediment, layer upon layer of reinforcement so dense that removal became self-destruction. In a sealed room inside the now-defunct Central Accord archive, one final historian entered the vault alone. He placed a copy of the revised Accord Charter on the pedestal. Then, beside it, laid an older version, the one from before the overwrite. He opened both books and compared the pages side by side. Line after line mirrored one another, except where they didn't. The historian drew a red marker from his case and underlined a line in the new charter. Earth, contributing civilization prior to Accord unification. He exhaled sharply and circled it once, then again, then paused. He uncapped the marker, held it over the original version, and didn't move. Instead, he picked up the revised copy and placed it on the top shelf. The older version stayed where it was, unopened. He turned to leave. Outside, in the square, a new statue had been unveiled. Alien sculptors had shaped the figures from layered alloy and stone, 3 tall silhouettes. Draped in robes not worn by any known species, stood with arms extended outward. Behind them, the base bore one phrase: legacy cannot be destroyed, only replaced. No mention of Earth. No need. Everyone already knew. If this story made you rethink what real power looks like, hit the like button and subscribe for more cold HFY stories. Drop a comment. Which part hit you hardest? Data as a weapon, or belief becoming law? Because in this galaxy, the sharpest war isn't fought with guns, it's fought with memory.